Hello, everyone. Looks like the Liberal government's at it again. They're trying to pass this new bill called C-11. Why is that so important to them? Well, if C-11 passes, that would give the government absolute control of censorship over anyone that speaks out against them and wasn't following the daily narrative.
Melanie Joly, who was the mayor of Montreal, she's now the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She replaced Marc Garneau because the way Justin Trudeau rewards loyalty and success on the campaign trail is by shuffling out Marc Garneau, who got reelected in my riding with 53% of the vote, shuffle him out of Minister of Foreign Affairs and replace him with Melanie Joly, more liberal online censorship. We know Bill C-10. I've talked about it. The law that didn't make it to the Senate because they prorogued Parliament, or they ended the session. Bill C-10 was intended to govern the interwebs the way radio and television is governed by the Broadcasting Act, or the Broadcast Act. Treat social media platforms, treat people's social media profiles like broadcasters and subject them to the provisions of the Broadcast Act. All right, the last things Canadians need is even more attempts to censor and regulate their social media, yet the Liberal government is once again hinting they're going to do just that. Experts already have their concerns about a controversial piece of legislation now known as Bill C-11, because I guess it follows Bill C-10, which died in the Senate because the session ended and the bill never got passed, so they got to start from scratch. I presume it's gonna hump on the back of that Bill C-10. There was a great uproar when the bill was first introduced that the government was planning to censor Canadians' social media, we wrote last month. While the government denied this, experts maintained the bill would have this very effect. By the way, just so we're clear on something as well, Minister Guilbeault, Minister of Heritage, the guy who was arrested once upon a time for scaling the CN Tower to protest climate change or whatever, he at first came out and said Bill C-10 is not intended to govern individual social media accounts. They said it's not intended to do that. But for those of you who have been on this channel for long enough or paying attention, at one point that was a concern. And at one point when they were drafting Bill C-10, they included a specific exclusion to say that Bill C-10, which would be an amendment to the Broadcasting Act, would not cover people's individual social media accounts. They included an exclusion specifically excluding social media accounts. In the dead of night, the Liberal government removed that exclusion. And then when Guilbeault, the Minister of Heritage, was being grilled on this, he says, they were saying, well, why did you remove the exclusion? Look, it doesn't matter. We don't want to do that anyhow. He says, yeah, but it was, I forget the reporter's name. If anybody knows, he's great. He says, yeah, but at one point it was included. And then at one point you removed it. If you have no intention of governing individual social media accounts, why did you remove the exclusion that was included to specify that exclusion? He had no good answer. And for good reason, because shortly thereafter, they ultimately concluded and they ultimately admitted, yeah, it's going to apply to social media accounts if they're big enough to qualify as broadcasters because they have to pay their fair share. They admitted after initially explaining, don't worry that the exclusion that was included was then subsequently excluded in the dead of night by the Liberal government. Don't worry about it. It's not intended to govern social media accounts, individuals. They then admit later on, yeah, if they're big enough, it will. Liars. They're just liars. There's no other way to put it. So it's the same cat and mouse game here, it seems. Law professor Michael Geis explained in a blog post that's appropriately headlined, not ready for prime time, that, quote, for all the talk that user-generated content is out, the truth is that everything from podcasts to TikTok videos fit neatly into the new exception that gives the CRTC, that's the governing body under the Broadcast Act, Canada Radio Television Communications, the power to regulate such content as a program. It's the same argument. They're not broadcasters unless they're big enough. We don't want to target individual accounts. We won't. Okay, we will if they're big enough and they qualify as broadcasters. This new bill means your online postings may soon be subject to government censorship. Last week, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly appeared before a House of Commons committee to discuss Russian disinformation. Yeah, they discuss Russian disinformation. Don't discuss Canadian disinformation. Don't discuss CBC. Posted that fake article, fake news on Engelhardt, the protester who regretted joining the protest. Bunk story. Don't talk about CBC state-funded media. Talk about Russian state-funded media. It's well known that President Vladimir Putin uses information warfare. Hashtag confession through projection. It's probably true, but it's still true of the Trudeau government, and we know it in real time. This is true whether it comes to manipulating the narrative. Hashtag confession through projection. Around the war in the Ukraine, that's just the variable, mutatis mutandis, or just pushing Russia's talking points. We literally just saw CBC do that with the healthcare system. Canada is pushing back, such as how the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission has banned the station Russia Today, also known as RT, from being offered in Canada. Leave it. The only way to punish a tyrant is to become a tyrant. What does this have to do with domestic censorship? Good question. We don't think it does. We think you should be able to push back against Putin's misinformation while still safeguarding Canadian freedom of expression. Okay. Yet Joly offered some chilling remarks that suggest the Liberals may use the invasion of Ukraine as a pretext for their domestic agenda. Social media companies need to do more, Joly said at committee. They need to make sure they recognize states have jurisdiction over them and that they're not technology platforms, but they're content producers. I mean, I might agree with this under certain circumstances, but it is our way collectively to make be careful, people, when you see that word, to make sure they can really be able to have strong democracies in the future. The best way to have a strong democracy is obviously to censor information. It's obviously to silence free speech. That's how you make strong democracies. In China, maybe. And I'm saying that only as the example because Justin Trudeau has been so vocal in his praise for that basic dictatorship. Yeah. The collective way to ensure that you have strong democracies is to suppress freedom of speech. Let that Orwellian doublethink sink in. This war is being fought with 21st century tools, including social media. Yeah, it's never happened before. That's quite a stretch to suddenly switch gears from Putin to talking points about all social media. Canadians should be concerned. Agreed. Anyways, it's garbage. It's obvious garbage. It's garbage from the Liberal government that just wants to control every aspect of every individual's lives from birth to death, to make them dependent on the government, to make them feel dependent psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, to make them think that they can't live without the government. The Liberals' relationship with citizens is the quintessential paradigm for an abusive relationship. You literally have the government saying, you can't live without me. If you try to leave me, I'm going to punish you. I control what you see, what you hear, who you talk to, who you see when you leave your house. It is the paradigm of an abusive relationship. Oh, okay. That's that.